It's a little bit embarrassing, but I'll do it anyway. We were not that much, well, not that many people in the dealership at that moment were into hot rods. I couldn't get enough of them. And the old man had a Thunderbird that had a 390 with three deuces on it. And it didn't run right. And several mechanics had taken a look at it and couldn't cure what the ailments of it. So the old man said to me, pardon me, Mr. Tasker said to me, "Want to give it a shot, see if you can fix it?" I said, "Sure, I'll check it out." Well, there's a situation that occurs when you take aluminum and put it next to steel. Between hot and cold, the growth rate is like 2.5 times to 1 with steel. So actually what you're doing is you're scrubbing the intake gaskets all the time. And that's what it turned out to be. It needed intake gaskets. So I turned around, I put new intake gaskets in it, fired it up, it still run crummy. So I had to tune, the carburetors were messed up, I guess from somebody trying to fix it. And I got the thing, running pretty good. And Mr. Tasker come out, he said, "Is it ready to go for a ride yet?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, come on, let's go." Took it out for a ride. The rest is history. I was never the most proficient or the quickest repair mechanic, but quality was my number one thing. Took a little longer to do it right, but it takes a lot longer to do it over again. So we hit it off. We thought alike. I mean, not too many people are lucky enough to have two fathers in one lifetime. Mine passed away in 1959 while I was going into the Navy, but Bob Tasker passed away many years later. But he was a second father to me. And he got me involved more than once with engineering people at Ford Motor Company. In fact, one day he said to me, he said, "You know what, Willie?" He used to call me Willie all the time. He said, "You're getting $1 million education. I hope you appreciate it." I used to work on 427s because not too many people in the shop wanted to. That was like, no, I can't make any money on that. We had both 63 and 64 Galaxies, quite a number of them. In fact, we had 63 and a half fastbacks. We had 50 of them. 64 was about 250 pounds heavier than the 63. And yet, the 64 would daylight the 63 like from here to that wall over there, which is a lot in a quarter mile. So the parts department used to get all the parts numbers on what they call microfiche. Well, those were good for about 3 months, and then they get so scratchy they throw them away. So I happened to be over the parts room, at parts counter, when they were taking out the new ones and throwing the old ones away, because you didn't always get a full package. Sometimes they would just send you the ones you needed the most. Well, I said to the parts manager, I said, "Can I have those old ones?" He said, "No, I can't give them to you." I said, "Why, is the trash can going to complain?" He said, "You're going to throw them away anyway." I said, "Look, if you could just give me the engine one, that'd make me happy." So he did. And I was into pictures like you're into pictures back then, but on slides. Well, I found out how to make my slide camera work with the microfiche, and I went through part by part by part to see what was different between the 63 427 engine and the 64 427 engine. Two things came up. One was the cylinder block, because the 63s, if you took them apart, put them back together again, guaranteed one of the head bolt holes in the corner would crack. So the 64 was reinforced in the four corners. The other thing that was different, and the only thing, was the cylinder heads. So I said, I got to get a hold of some of those cylinder heads. Not knowing at that point that Ford Parts had 200 sets of them in stock. All I had to do was order them. But anyway, I drove the people nuts at Ford. Way Ford operates is after they get done with something, they turn around and they scrap it. They don't, I mean, you get enough stuff, you don't want to keep everything laying around. So I get a call from this guy called Bob Snyder, who they used to call Jumpy. And he said, I understand you're looking for some 427 cylinder heads. I said, who is this? What are you busting my hub for? He said, what would you pay for 3 of them in a crate? I happened to be in Bob Tasca's office at that moment. He puts me on the speakerphone because he had a feeling I might be getting a personal call. And he didn't like personal calls while you were working. So he heard that. Next thing you know, he cuts in and he says, who am I speaking to? And Snyder says, well, who's this? He said, this is Bob Tasca Sr. And Jumpy said, yeah? Well, what do you want? He said, who do you work for? Bob told him. He said, who's he work for? And Bob told him. He's going up the ladder, and he finally gets to one of the big executives, and he said, son, stay right where you're at. He said, within 10 minutes, you're going to get a phone call. So I turned around at that point, because he had more or less taken over the conversation. He didn't need me. I'm going back to work. So I go back to my stall, and in the corner where John Healy and I worked, we had what we called a hotline, because we used to get numerous phone calls during the day. And the old man says, oh, don't you dare not take them. He said, that's how I sell high-performance parts. Okay. Phone rings. John is off somewhere. I go over and I answer the phone, and I hear, you son of a bitch. When I see you, he said, you better duck, because the first thing I'm going to do is punch you in the nose. Those cylinder heads are my personal property. I'm to hand deliver them to you. I said, well, what do you want from me? What are you mad at me for? You talk to the boss. You're not talking to the boss now, so whatever happened there, I had nothing to do with. I went back to my stall, which I'm in right now, working on his car. Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sorry. The next thing you know, I wind up with 3 cylinder heads. So now, somebody else that a lot of people don't know about, but I didn't meet him until after I knew him for 53 years, is Billy Barr, who's a Ford design engineer, who actually winds up inheriting what we created. And here again, Bob Tasca was the kind of guy that if one of the younger engineers come up with what they thought was a bright move, something we should build, and the upper management, which was a bunch of stuffed shirts for the most part, say, nah, we don't want to get involved in that. Well, the word got around that, hey, if you got something that's good and you needed to get it sold, give it to Bob Tasca. If it's any good, he'll sell it. No questions asked. They'll build it on his say-so. So I talked to Billy Barr and tell him what's going on about, I got these, 427 heads, and he said, well, forget putting them on the 390. He said, that's too much overlap for the spread. In fact, I don't think because of the valves being spread out that they would even clear the bore. He said, what I would do if it was me, and that was the way Billy was. He never condemned you, but he would give you an alternate. And you take it or leave it. Well, he suggested that I get a Police Interceptor short block and put the heads on that. Well, make a long story shorter, that was the birth of the 428 Cobra Jet. The only thing I had to modify when I got it was I took the third head that I had, took everything out of it, put a head gasket on the short block, put the head on it, bolted it down with two valves that a guy had made up for me that had carbide cutters welded into them. And I actually machined the valve pockets because, hey, first of all, they were in a different location, being wider spaced, and get it all together and everything. And Mr. Tasca takes it for a ride. He was absolutely blown away. Gets a hold of Ford and tells him that, you know, I got something we definitely ought to build. Well, he got out to Dearborn and he was so excited. Henry Ford said, Tasca, if you want it, you build it. It's too late in the year for me to, you know, get it out for next year. So Mr. Tasca said, oh yeah, watch. He said, you don't know the right people. And hey, we made it happen. In fact, one of those cars, two of those cars out there wound up going to the winter. In fact, the winner of the Winter Nationals car is out there, Al Joniak's car. Well, Bob Tasca had a gold notchback Mustang. We took the 390 out of it, put it in a used car. I stole the parts off that I need to complete the engine package that we put in there. And next thing you know, take the car to Dearborn, and the deal was, Mr. Tasca said, you get every one of what's presently being sold, hot rod wise, or performance wise, whichever prefer the statement. I want to see them at the line. And one guy is to drive them all. Well, the rest is history, because the Mustang won. Because, I mean, as soon as we got in that car and took it for a ride, I mean, he lit up like a candle. He said, oh yeah, this is the way to go. Because Ford had pretty much, because of what they had coming in the future with the 385 series engines and whatnot, had said, FE's dead. We don't need the FE engine anymore, which is what the 428 Cobra Jet is an FE engine. But he got it done. There was nothing on that engine that wasn't Ford parts. So you could say, well, you didn't create anything. You just assembled it. Well, yeah, but if you don't assemble the right amount of parts in the right place, it goes nowhere.